Commanded by two capable and experienced military leaders, Nogai Khan and Talabuga Khan, the Golden Horde's army divided and entered Poland via two attack points. For many of the Poles, they had little option. In 1287, Talabuka, a descendant of Genghis Khan, became Khan of the Mongolian Golden Horde, one of the successor states to emerge after the breakup of the original Mongol Empire. Talabuka was essentially the rightful heir to the throne, representing the senior branch of the line of his great-grandfather, Batu Khan. Talabuka ruled alongside his kinsman, the General Nogai Khan, who during his life acted as something of a kingmaker in the Golden Horde. Recently, in 1285, Nogai and Talabuka had led the second Mongol invasion of Hungary, which had resulted in defeat for the Golden Horde. However, the two decided to once again attack Europe, this time targeting the Kingdom of Poland, according to James Chambers, to prevent the Poles from supporting the Hungarian barons. In November of 1287, Nogai ordered his Ruthenian vassals to prepare their armies for an expedition into Poland, while he and Talabuka assembled their cavalries. As a result, Nogai and Talabuka marched out at the head of a large invasion force, numbering around 30,000, composed of Mongol and Turkic cavalry, as well as some Ruthenian auxiliaries. Nogai himself devised the plan of attack. As in their previous invasion of Poland in 1259, the Golden Horde host was divided into two armies. One cavalry force, numbering around 20,000, including some Ruthenian troops, was led by Talabuga Khan and would drive toward Sandomierz in the north of Poland. Simultaneously, Nogai Khan would lead 10,000 cavalry, composed entirely of Mongols and Turks, toward Krakow. This two-pronged raid was to be conducted at lightning speed to prevent the Poles from mounting an effective defense. After plundering their respective targets and conquering Sandomierz, the two armies were to reunite north of Krakow. From here, they would loot Kielce, Jędrzejów, Miekov, and finally Krakow. Once Poland was thoroughly ravaged, the combined Mongol host would withdraw back into the territory of the Golden Horde. The Mongols did achieve surprise. The first Polish prince to march against the Mongols was Leszek II the Black, High Duke of Poland, described as King of Poland by historian William Urban. At the time, the Polish monarchy was experiencing a period of fragmentation, but according to Urban, Leszek had restored the kingdom and himself become king. Leszek was a gifted ruler and military commander. He defeated the Rus in battle, and in 1282 crushed the Sudevian Prussians during the Northern Crusades. Joined by Hungarian and Cuman allies, he'd captured Krakow in 1285. Now, during the third Mongol invasion, he managed to assemble an army numbering as many as 15,000 men, though ultimately historians are unsure as to the size of this host. Despite his success as a warrior, Leszek's married life proved less fruitful. His wife, Gryfina of Halich, never conceived a child. In 1271, she fled to Krakow and openly accused Leszek of impotence, claiming that her marriage had never been consummated. This caused great scandal, but in 1275, with the intervention of other members of the Polish nobility, the couple were reconciled. Leszek sought treatment from the famous physician Mikołaj of Krakow. The physician's cure included eating frogs and snakes. However, Leszek and Gryfina never had children, which, according to the annals of Poland, caused a great abomination for the country. Like the Hungarians, the Poles had improved many of the fortifications in their kingdom by the 1280s.
How's it going, everybody?
Krakow now had a strongly built stone citadel and its own defensive catapults. Conversely, during the first two Mongol invasions of Poland, Krakow's walls had been made of wood.
There we go. All right. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Real Crusades History, Coffee and the Crusades. And actually, this is the first episode of this stream where I do not have coffee sitting here next to me. And that's just because I guess things were kind of a little bit chaotic Just now we had a small power outage here in the neighborhood. I suppose these things do happen. Threw me off a bit. I was on schedule working on a new video, which is coming out hopefully by Friday. If not Friday, then early the week after. But I'm pretty sure Friday. About the Battle of Mahi. So continuing with the Hungarians or the Mongol invasions of the West. But how's the audio sounding to everybody? Now that YouTube is basically my job, it's basically what I do for a career. I kind of lay things out like that. Like, okay, I'm going to get this done today and this done and this, and it's little hiccups in that can kind of throw you a bit off, especially when, you're mostly a one man operation. I do hire out some aspects of the videos, but a lot of it I pretty much do on my own. And honestly, managing the parts that you hire out to people does require some attention. So you guys are saying false advertising, no coffee. Yeah, it's true. I don't have coffee today. I've got my standard fizzy water, which I tend to have those. But also, I'm kind of transitioning to just calling the show "Coffee and the Crusades," which without the subtitle of "Ask Me Anything About the Crusades." I generally like to stick that in there because I think it kind of attracts attention. People are, if they see that pop up on their YouTube feed, ask me anything about the Crusades. Well, I want to ask something about the Crusades. I think a lot of people like to ask things about the Crusades. People are so curious about the Crusades, aren't they? I tell you what, everywhere I go in life, when I start talking to people about what I do, I mean, just about everybody wants to talk about the Crusades. The Crusades may be the most conversation starting topic from the medieval world. Maybe. You guys tell me what you think. All right, let's say hi to everybody. I promise next time I'll have coffee so that the show. I'll tell you though, I have had multiple cups of coffee already this morning, so the coffee is coursing through my nervous system and my entire body. So the coffee is happening. All right, and there's Sam. He's got his coffee today. Sheila's got her fizzy water. John, I do not have donuts at the moment, although my daughter. We got her some on Sunday. She was asking for them. We were at church and coffee and donuts were canceled. So we get in the car and she says, Daddy, can we get some donuts? And so my wife and I pulled off and got the kids some donuts, and we got them. We went and got a mixed dozen or whatever. And one of them was a chocolate covered one with, the cream filling inside. And my son wanted that one. He's 3 years old. And he said, Mommy, I want the brown one. So she hands him the chocolate one. And he sits there with the donut and just licks at he just licks at the chocolate frosting. And he licks that till it's just about gone. Then he hands it back to my wife. He says, all done. I don't want this anymore. I love how toddlers do that. If you guys have toddlers, you know that one thing they do is if you give them something that's got a glaze or a frosting on it, they lick it and they give it back to you like cake or something. They just, they're into the frosting. They don't really care about, actually eating the freaking thing. They just want to lick the chocolate off of it, then hand it back to mom and dad. That's another thing that toddlers do is they don't put something down. At least my son doesn't. He has this thing where he has to hand it back to you. Like, I don't want this anymore. If he's got a toy, even he's like, Daddy, I don't want my doggy or my frog. He's got all these. My son's got all these stuffed animals that he walks around with at different times. He always needs a different one. Like he'll say, Daddy, I need my Triceratops or whatever it is, and he's got to have the right one at that moment. So anyway, those are my kids. I'm pretty crazy about the kids. So try not to be one of those parents who just rambles about their kids. But anyway, glad you guys are all here. Let's get to some questions. I will say this, a pretty cool announcement I have for you guys is that, let me see if I can find this. over, let's see, Knights of the Cross, Purgatory. There is a scene from the pilot, which is available now, that you guys can watch. So I'm kind of excited about that. Let me see here. It's the Purgatory scene. It is, and I'm going to talk more about this weekend. Austin, Kelly, and I will be doing a special stream. Zenex says my little cousin is the same with plush animals. Yeah, it's actually pretty cute. He's always got one under his arm. You know, he's got to have it too. It's very important. Anyway, but Austin, Kelly, and I this Friday evening are going to do a stream where we take a look at this scene from Knights of the Cross. You guys can now watch a full, let's see here, a full scene from the upcoming pilot. I'm going to share this screen here. knightsofthecross.com. Check that out. Oh, and I'm going to open up Power Chat in case somebody wants to send a Power Chat. I never want to. Let's see here. I swear I can't look at another tab without losing my train of thought with you guys. Yes, what I was going to say is I will have Power Chats open in case somebody wants to send that, and I will keep an eye on that just in case. Okay, knightsofthecross.com. Here we are. I think the Purgatory scene is up here. And if not, I will find it on the YouTube channel. But yeah, let's, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to put that on right now. Maybe toward the end of the stream, we'll watch that. But I really want to debut that on this Friday. But that stream is going to be on the main YouTube channel just to kind of, for dramatic effect, just to kind of have a broader audience. We kind of have an intimate group here for this show we do. And I do like that. But I think we kind of need to debut it to the big crowd on Friday. So, okay. What questions do you guys have today? But I'll tell you what, if you guys go to, oh wait, you know what? That may even be unlisted. Austin may still have that video unlisted. I'm not sure it's even. We'll do this. We'll do it on Friday. We'll get that out so you guys can check out the scene. But it is a part of King Richard's vision while he's ill, which he's ill during part of the pilot, or much of it. And he has a series of visions. One of them is he encounters his father, King Henry II, in purgatory. And it's really cool how we created purgatory for this. And I owe all that, of course, to Aaron and Greg and their team at Cinema Forte. Just awesome work that they do. But yeah, but we will be talking about that on Friday. So you guys will get to check that out. So please be at the main YouTube channel. And you guys will see it advertised. I'll put it up. But let's get to a few questions today. And as a lot of you probably know, Lepanto was Lepanto Day just happened, and there's a new video on the Real Crusades History YouTube channel about that, which I'm sure some of you guys have already checked out. Just kind of remembering the Battle of Lepanto. And I was really hoping on Friday to stream when we had Lepanto Day going on, but I did in fact have a conflict, and just in terms of getting this new video done on time. So, and yeah, John asks if I'm wearing the, yeah, this is the Knights Hospitaller t-shirt from Real Crusades History that hopefully all of you guys have picked up at this point. It's available in the store, linked down below in the description. So let's see, what kind of questions do you guys have today? We'll probably have to cut it a bit short because I do have to kind of get going again on working on the new video. LG, were coat of arms created simultaneously with surcoats? I seem to remember there was a time when people wore blank colored surcoats. Yeah, the coat of arms and having an official crest or standard for a particular knight does come more toward the middle of the High Middle Ages. I believe we're looking at the 12th century on that. In the 11th century, it still wasn't quite a thing, or it wasn't a universal thing at that point. You did have banners. So, for example, you're going to fight under the banner of the Duke of Normandy or the banner of the Count of Flanders or whoever that is. I mean, that's still a thing. But if we look at, like the Bayeux Tapestry, for example, the shields and well, there were no surcoats at that point. It was just the mail hauberk. And in fact, Sam has an answer to this. This is awesome. Yeah, like on your shield, you might just have like a dragon or some kind of motif. At that point, it wasn't really associated so much with this particular house or this particular aristocracy. And part of that too was that the medieval nobility hadn't fully developed, as a into specific houses with, real set in stone type of family dynasty and that kind of thing. There was some fluidity to that. You had people coming from less highborn backgrounds who were coming up in the world and becoming tough fighters who, you were good on a horse and you were a capable fighter out in the fields. The Normans were the pioneers of this. I mean, the more traditional aristocratic houses that would be more solidified in the late 12th and 13th centuries were not quite there yet. So heraldry was not as much a thing. And Sam has a good answer for us, it looks like. The development of heraldry is a pretty complex topic, but surcoats definitely predate the use of heraldry on them. Exactly. I think really it's not till the 13th century that is very, very widespread. Through a lot of the 12th century, even the early 12th century, if you look at the knights from that period, they look a lot like, kind of what we think of as 11th century knights. They really do. The surcoat is definitely not universal at that point. And even into the late 12th century, there's an image I know. Let's see here if I can find this. There's an image of Richard the Lionheart from the Osprey series that just shows him wearing a hauberk. And of course, this is like 1191 or so, but this is not inaccurate. This is not inaccurate. Where is that? Okay, I don't have it in here. Okay, I'll show it to you guys a different time, but it's okay. Next questions. Let's see. RCH, have you ever been to Antioch? Tom, I have not been to Antioch. I believe it's in modern day Turkey in terms of where it's located. It's not, I think that's correct. It's not necessarily in Syria, like the modern country of Syria. At the time, it was considered Syria. Of course, there was no Turkey at that time. There was Anatolia, but modern Turkey kind of spills over into parts of what used to be considered Syria, as I understand it. We've got ITZ. Is there a battle in which the Crusaders betrayed their friends and joined the Muslims in the midst of battle? That's kind of a complex question. Definitely there were shifting alliances on both sides, throughout the history of the Crusades. There were Muslims who used Christian mercenaries. There were Christians who used Muslim mercenaries. I do think it's just such a huge topic. I mean, you've got a lot of variation in that. We know that, for example, in the Reconquista in Spain, like in the midst of battle, I don't think so. I've never seen an example of that because, but somebody might be able to find one. I know that, there is some talk that possibly at the Battle of the Guadalete River in 711, the battle in which the Muslim invasion force under Tariq defeated the Visigothic king Roderick, the decisive battle that basically led to the Muslim conquest of Spain. There is some indication that some of Roderick's vassals or some of the Visigothic nobility were not too happy with King Roderick and betrayed him or held back in the midst of the battle. Historians disagree on that. Historians debate that widely. We don't know very much about that period. Unfortunately, the sources are so spotty for the 8th century in general, but we definitely get that from the Reconquista period. It's pretty spotty, but there's definitely seems to be an indication. Historians do tend to agree that at the time of the Arab conquest, the Visigoths were in the midst of a civil war of some sort. there was civil conflict going on. And that does seem to be one of the big reasons why the Muslims were able to achieve the knockout blow that they did. So, John Phelps. Did the Templars take part in the Civil War in England during the King John Revolt leading to Magna Carta? I don't think so. I don't think so. The Templars tended to, it was part of their oath that they would not involve themselves in the political squabbles of Christian princes. So the Templars were taking an oath that, quite frankly, all of Christendom should have been taking. There should have been a refusal to engage in political squabbles among the Christian powers. That was the ideal behind the Crusades, anyway. It never was fully achieved, of course, not even close. But how that always played out in practice, even for the Templars and the Hospitallers, that can be up to question. But they never really did get, even when there was some of that going on, they tended to be very aloof at best. So, Xenix. Saeed Book nicely flows into a second question. Can you present some arguments for the HRE being Holy Roman and an empire? I'd love some ammunition for Voltaire's parrots repeating him online. That is a good question. Sorry, guys, I'm recovering from a bit of a cold. So yeah, there's plenty of things to think of. Honestly, I think the part of that that's probably the most difficult to justify is the empire part, because of the nature of Germanic kingship itself, which I do think kind of held on through the whole history of the Holy Roman Empire. The idea of, and I want to qualify that, but the thing that we get with the Holy Roman Empire is you get a system in which you've got an emperor who is kind of put into place by a circle of great men, the electors of the Holy Roman Empire. Some of them are bishops, some of them are great magnates. And the reality is the Holy Roman Emperor is a kind of a first among equals. And there seems to be a sense that he really was not, he couldn't really assert himself over that circle of electors. I think there was, now the whole history of the Holy Roman Empire, to some extent, I think, is trying to work that out. I think the emperors themselves like to think of themselves as having an imperial type of power, but many of the great men didn't want to think of it that way. And I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this, because this is the kind of thing that people do PhD dissertations on, obviously. But yeah, I mean, there does seem to be kind of, I mean, like Frederick Barbarossa and guys like that. I mean, that's kind of what the history of the Holy Roman Empire is about to some extent. And then, Frederick II, he comes to power, and one of the keys to the centrality of his power is the fact that he has Sicily. Sicily was really, which had previously been a Norman kingdom, was the most centralized aspect of his great domain, and he struggled with his supposed vassals in the empire. Earlier on, I think it's more justified. Like if we're talking about the 10th century and some of the great emperors like Otto, although I suppose that even then, is it really an empire? Or is it more of a kingdom? But anyway, that aside, in terms of it being Roman, I think that's absolutely justifiable. Just kind of thinking about this issue. I mean, going back to Charlemagne, Charlemagne, the empire that he creates, I think is definitely justifiable as an empire. The Carolingian period, although, arguably that's not the Holy Roman Empire yet. That's the Carolingian Empire, and then the Holy Roman Empire gets started, a bit later than that. But there's room for debate there too. But the Romanness of it, I mean, this was, these were the inheritors of the Latin civilization that had been at the heart of Rome. And I think especially when you're talking about in relation to the Byzantine Empire, which this was the Greek East, which even during the days of the Roman Empire, the Greek East was always kind of the Greek East. It was a part of the Roman world, but even once they got their empire, the Romans kind of lost something of Romanness, and they even had a sense of that. They had a sense that they loved the Hellenic East. They loved it. They loved Greek civilization. At the same time, they recognized that this was kind of a world of autocratic rulers, these kind of like god kings or, tyrannical type of rulers who had this pomp and ceremony in their courts. And the Byzantine emperors were very much like this. They were kind of like Eastern despots, I guess you might say. I mean, they were the guy on the elaborate, beautiful throne, drenched in gold. He was untouchable. There was like flames shooting up around him, and lions and stuff in the court ceremony. It was you can imagine the Crusaders walking into this and looking at this and just thinking, okay, what is the deal with this? I mean, it's just not a Western thing. In the West, it's different. You've got the war band. You've got the king. He's a warrior king. He's got his armor. He's got his boys around him. I mean, this is very much more the model in the West. Kind of the first among equals type of model. The king is kind of he's the sovereign. He's the father of the kingdom, but he has his circle around him of his great men. He takes advice from them. In fact, he even is obliged to take advice from them on making a great decision. He's not kind of a removed divine, figure kind of floating in the ethereal realm above everyone. That's very much more an Eastern thing. So Latin law, Latin civilization, the language itself. I mean, this was the inheritance of the West. Whereas Byzantium kind of, this was the Greek-speaking world. This was the Hellenic world. I mean, Byzantium is very much a continuation of this Hellenic civilization that Rome inherited once it became a great empire. But anyway, not to ramble too much on this, but I think, and holy. Okay, well, I think of that as the religiosity of Latin Christendom, and certainly Christianity was at the center of the Holy Roman Empire. So, you might say, well, I don't think it was very holy. I think these guys were a bunch of sinners. Okay, well, that's fine, but still, it was Christendom was at the center of the thing, just as much as it was in the Byzantine world or any other Christian kingdom. Let's be honest. Are the Byzantines any more holy than the Holy Roman emperors? If one is holy, the other is holy. Let's just put it that way. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, kind of a big question. I guess I'll leave it at that. If there's more you want to hear about that, Xenix, then let me know. Like if there's any part of that just was me rambling, which all of it was, then let me know where I could clarify it more for you. John, were Templars allowed to receive money donations from pilgrims? And did they have to give it directly to the temple? If so, I will tell you, I don't recall ever reading a specific procedure for how a donation was supposed to be received, but certainly any donations that were received belonged to the temple. The Templars did not have personal property. Templars would have gone about with money and with resources, just like they had equipment, they had swords, they had horses. They had things on them that they used to deal with daily life, to deal with their relationships within, the political environment of the Christian world. But these things belonged to the temple. So anything that would have been handed to a Templar in this, let's say somebody runs up to a Templar and hands him a donation, says this is for the temple. I don't think the Templar is going to shove that back in his hand and say, no, you have to go to the Templar district and give it to them there. I think he's probably going to accept that donation. But I'll be honest, I've never seen anything specifically about a procedure for how donations were to be received. But I guess the key part there is, who did that property belong to? The property absolutely just belonged to the temple. The Templars themselves did not have personal property. None of them, not even the Grand Master. El Cid is in the chat. El Cid himself. On Friday, I am visiting the Temple Church in London. Do you know of any famous Templars or Crusaders who are buried there? There are some effigies, but these are not tombs. Uh, yeah, I don't know of any specific Templars who are buried there. You guys can let me know in the chat if you know of any. I'm sure a quick Wikipedia search would give us that information too. Sam, in the Majeski Bible from about 1250, it seems that surcoats are entirely optional and do not display heraldic devices. So from 1250 on. Okay, interesting. There's textual evidence of heraldic surcoats earlier, but I am too unfamiliar with the topic to give a straightforward answer. I think you're talking about until 1250, right, Sam? Excuse me. And I just realized I was talking to a muted mic. Sorry about that, guys. ITZ. To answer your question, a crusader was anybody who had taken a vow of crusade as recognized by the church. Sorry, guys. A crusade had to be was recognized by the church as a crusade. No, not any battle just involving Christians could be considered a crusade. It had to have that key backing of the church. It had to have a bull of crusade from the church to be considered a crusade. Sheila Horn, has anyone read Raymond Ibrahim's book Defenders of the West? I want to check that out. Sheila. Thanks for bringing that up. Xenix, to an extent, the first among equal model applies, but at the same time, we also have ideas like the divine right of kings combined with Christian ideals like the kingship of Christ, Davidic kingship. Exactly, Zenik. Really good points. We can't ignore that. And, to some extent, all this stuff there was some tension there. A lot of what we see as we get into the late Middle Ages is tension between the kings of the West and their vassals. How is that relationship defined? As time went on, as these monarchies became more powerful, more centralized, there was a strong tendency for the rulers to want that acknowledged more. In some sense, it's like they wanted more of what the more of what was the tradition in the East. I mean, you can imagine a lot of monarchs that would be attractive. I think back to Constantine, and even once Roman law itself became more widespread, the more codified version of Roman law, once that became more widespread in Latin Europe in the 13th century, like Justinian's law code, for example, which I guess that's debatable how, that's fairly late Roman law. That idea of kind of the more centrality of the monarchy became, it was very attractive to kings like Philip IV of France. I mean, and this was still being debated into the early modern period. The divine right of kings, I do think, kind of belongs more to the end of the Middle Ages as we're getting into the early modern period. I mean, these ideas became a lot more feasible at that point. Earlier in the Middle Ages, they just weren't feasible. A king like William the Conqueror, for example. A lot of people think of William the Conqueror as a very strong king who had a very central type of control over his monarchy. And that's true. However, his power came from thinking how to put this. I mean, it came to a large extent from the Norman model of the centrality of his family, the centrality of his circle around him. When William the Conqueror conquered England, he granted a bunch of land to the important men in his what really amounts to his personal entourage, you know. And these were the guys who made sure that the centrality of his leadership was a reality. Now, I don't think that at all makes him some kind of puppet. I don't want to give that impression. But it's a little bit different than when you have these more advanced monarchies in the early modern period that have more of kind of a professionalized administration in place, where the king can kind of exercise power through these different functions of government, as opposed to through his guys who make things happen for him. You know, I think that's more what we see in the early Middle Ages. And of course, William the Conqueror is, you know, the Normans were at the cutting edge of centralized government during that period. I'm looking at the chat and I can see all the places where you guys are, where I was just talking to a muted mic there for a while. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, it's interesting. These are such huge subjects. I mean, there's just so much to unpack. But it is really fascinating, like the nature of how power was manifested, you know, because there's one thing to talk about, you know, what a kingdom is on paper, you know, or you know, theoretically, versus how it actually functioned. I mean, early on in the Middle Ages, you don't really have these professional bureaucracies at all, which in some sense, that's what I find so attractive about these periods. Honestly, it was more about guys who could get stuff done and had men around them who were competent. You know, in the early modern world, you've got kind of these more developed bureaucracies, and, you know, and that just keeps going until now. And that's all we have. It's just like layers and layers of endless bureaucracy and almost no human factor. So anyway, John Phelps. I'll take a couple more questions, guys, and then I really need to get back to working on this video, get back to the grind. Could the kingdom of Jerusalem under King Gi have won the war against Saladin if he chose not to meet Saladin at Lake Tiberias and remain behind the walls of Jerusalem and fortresses? Well, I don't think it would have made sense to remain behind the walls, because you can't keep your whole army together behind the walls of these small, relatively small by today's standards, medieval cities and towns. But if you've got the army in the field and you keep it in a location where it can't really come under serious threat, then yeah. I mean, look, if King Gi just got the army together and just kept it in areas where it could kind of menace Saladin, but would not be put into a vulnerable position, then yeah, I mean, there's just no question that the Battle of Hattin probably doesn't happen, or if it does happen, it's not the Battle of Hattin. It happens somewhere else, you know, far more favorable to the Crusaders. And Saladin can destroy some stuff. Definitely, he can raid. He can dispatch raiding parties, but he has to be careful. He's got to be really careful if the army of the Kingdom of Jerusalem is operating in the field. You know, it's the duty of the King of Jerusalem was, when it was invaded during this period, and Baldwin IV understood this, was to organize the army, to marshal it, and to respond to Saladin's invasion. That doesn't necessarily mean at all that you have to go to battle. It doesn't mean that at all. In fact, it may be unfavorable to go to battle at certain times. Now, if the opportunity presents itself, like at Montgisard, then you do it. Or at the Battle of Belvoir Castle, both times where Saladin was defeated. So yeah, which is the thing that makes Hattin's like such a bizarre episode in history. I mean, you know, yeah, Guy fell into Saladin's trap. That's exactly what he did. But still, I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, I do think if you had a better, even given the horrible situation that was, honestly, I think if Richard the Lionheart or Baldwin IV had been there in the exact same situation, I think the Crusaders win. I really do, because I think the army would have hung together. The big problem at Hattin is that the cohesion of the army collapses. everybody's trying to figure out how to survive and how to deal with it because Guy's not an effective commander. If you've got somebody like Baldwin IV or Richard the Lionheart there, everybody says, I am sticking with him. I'm sticking with him. All right, we're going to take a couple more questions. Some of you guys are answering the questions in the chat for me. I appreciate that. Diogo asked, was Sancho VII of Navarre really 2.2 meters tall? He was very tall. We don't know exactly how tall he was. I don't think we do. Maybe they have his remains, but he was a tall guy. This will be our last one. This is from Knight for Christ, who I don't think I've seen in the chat before. This may be the first time you've come, my friend. How did the Crusader states treat the Jews? Did it differ from ruler to ruler? No, it was pretty much the same throughout. They were treated well. They were allowed to do their thing. They made good money in the kingdom. They were merchants. They were not mistreated at all. During this time, Jews did pretty well in most parts of Christian Europe. There were a lot of Jews in parts of Spain at this time, but yeah, I mean, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, there were Jewish communities there. There were synagogues there. As far as I know, they were not allowed to be in Jerusalem itself. I believe that was the one stipulation that might be considered from their perspective to be somewhat oppressive. Jerusalem was reserved during the period of the Kingdom of Jerusalem for Christians. It was just considered that, which, the Muslims didn't do that, but, and I would have to kind of look into it to know if it was always strictly observed. But yeah, the idea was that Jerusalem was going to belong to the Christians. Muslims and Jews didn't enter into Jerusalem during the period, but they could be everywhere else in the kingdom. And they were, there were Jews in places like Acre and Tyre, and they had communities there. They had factories and places where they did business, and they traveled as traders and merchants and did well. So, okay, guys, we will call it a day. Sorry about the crazy, chaotic false starts and, starting late because of power outages and things like that. So, let's do this again. I will see you guys on Friday. We do this every Tuesday and Friday, 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. So we'll see you guys then. And look for a special stream about Knights of the Cross this coming Friday night with Austin and I on the main Real Crusades History channel. And all right, that's it for now. Talk to you guys next time.